For years, Europe asked one question about Ukraine. What does Ukraine need from the West? More artillery, more air defense, more tanks, more ammunition, more money. But the drone war has changed the question. Now Europe has to ask something very different. What does Europe need to learn from Ukraine? Because Ukraine is no longer only a customer of Western weapons. It has become a battlefield laboratory, a school of modern war, and increasingly, a source of military technology that other countries now want to understand. This is the real problem behind Europe's so-called drone wall. Europe is trying to build a defensive shield against Russia, but Ukraine has already learned the hard lesson. Modern defense is not only about expensive missiles, large platforms, and traditional air defense systems. It is about cheap interceptors. It is about sensors. It is about software. It is about operators. It is about production speed. And above all, it is about adapting faster than the enemy. That is why Ukraine just exposed Europe's drone problem. The most important lesson from Ukraine is simple. The battlefield is becoming transparent. In previous wars, tanks, armoured vehicles, and infantry could still move with some expectation of concealment. They could hide behind terrain. They could manoeuvre at night. They could rely on speed, armour, and surprise. That world has not disappeared completely, but it has been badly damaged. In Ukraine, drones are everywhere. Small reconnaissance drones watch roads, tree lines, trenches, staging areas, artillery positions and supply routes. First-person view drones turn cheap commercial technology into precision strike weapons. Larger drones search deeper behind the line, and software systems help connect sensors, operators, artillery, and strike teams. The result is a battlefield where movement is much harder to hide. A tank can still be powerful, but if it is detected, tracked, and targeted by a cheap drone, its value changes. A convoy can still move, but if the road is watched by drones, the convoy becomes a target. An assault can still be launched, but if the approach route is covered by drones, mines, artillery, and surveillance, the assault can become a kill zone before it reaches the objective. That is what Ukraine has learned under fire, and that is what Europe is now trying to absorb. The drone war has created a new kind of danger zone along the front. These are not just trenches, they are drone kill zones. In these areas, any vehicle, group of soldiers, supply truck, or exposed position can be detected and attacked quickly. The front line is no longer only a line of troops, it is a layered zone of observation and strike. Reconnaissance drones find movement. FPV drones attack vehicles and soldiers. Artillery follows coordinates. Electronic warfare tries to break the link. Then both sides adapt again. Every day. The cycle repeats. Drones find the target, strike teams attack it, electronic warfare jams the signal, and both sides adapt again. This is why drones have become so important in Russian losses. Open-source military analysis has estimated that, by mid-2025, unmanned systems were causing around 70 to 80% of battlefield casualties for both sides. Other public assessments have described Ukrainian drones as responsible for roughly 3/4 of Russian casualties over the past year. The exact number changes by sector, month, and methodology, but the strategic point is clear. Drones are no longer a supporting tool, they are one of the main killers on the battlefield. That changes how armies must think about armour, infantry, logistics, and air defence. It also changes how Europe must think about defending itself, because the European problem is not only Russian tanks, it is not only Russian missiles, and it is not only Russian aircraft, it is the combination of drones, missiles, electronic warfare, cheap mass production, and battlefield adaptation. That is why the idea of a European drone wall has emerged. but the term can be misleading. A drone wall is not a physical wall. It is not one fence. It is not one weapon. It is a network. A real drone wall would need sensors to detect low-flying threats, radars that can see small objects, electronic warfare systems that can jam or confuse drones, cheap interceptors that can destroy incoming drones without wasting expensive missiles, command systems that connect data quickly, operators trained to make decisions under pressure, and factories able to produce enough systems to replace constant losses. That last point is critical. In drone warfare, numbers matter. A perfect system that exists in small numbers is not enough. A cheap system that can be produced, improved, and replaced quickly may matter more. This is where Ukraine has gained experience that Europe cannot simply buy from a catalogue. Ukraine did not learn drone warfare in a laboratory. It learned by surviving. At the beginning of the full-scale war, Ukraine did not have a massive modern drone industry. Now, it has become one of the most important drone warfare ecosystems in the world. Small teams design drones. Units test them at the front. Operators give feedback. Manufacturers change designs. New versions appear quickly. Electronic warfare forces another adjustment. Then the cycle begins again. This is not the slow procurement culture of peacetime Europe. It is wartime iteration. And that may be Ukraine's most valuable military export. Not just the drone itself, but the system around the drone, the skill, the doctrine, the software, the training, the ability to adapt quickly. This is why the story has moved beyond Ukraine. European governments are now trying to build low-cost air defense systems, including autonomous drones and cheaper interceptors. The reason is economic. It makes little sense to spend a very expensive missile to destroy a cheap drone. If the enemy can launch hundreds or thousands of them, that exchange ratio can break even wealthy militaries. Russia has used large numbers of Iranian-designed Shahd-type drones and Russian-made versions to pressure Ukrainian air defences. Ukraine has responded with a mix of missiles, guns, jamming, mobile teams, and interceptor drones. That mix matters. It shows that modern air defense must be layered. A Patriot missile may be essential against ballistic missiles, but it is not the ideal answer to every cheap drone. A gun truck may work in one situation. Electronic warfare may work in another. A small interceptor drone may be the right answer somewhere else. The future is not one perfect weapon. It is a system of systems. That is the lesson Europe is now trying to learn. And this lesson is not staying in Europe. It has reached the Middle East. Gulf countries have faced the same basic problem from a different direction. Iranian drones and missiles have shown how relatively cheap systems can threaten energy infrastructure, bases, shipping routes, and cities. For wealthy Gulf states, the problem is not only whether they can buy advanced air defense. They can. The problem is cost, scale, and adaptation. If a country spends expensive interceptors against waves of cheaper drones, the attacker may be able to impose an economic burden even when many drones are intercepted. That is why Ukraine's experience has become valuable. Ukraine has sent air defense and drone specialists to countries such as Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. Kyiv is trying to turn battlefield experience into strategic partnerships, funding, and future export markets. This is a major change. Ukraine was once seen mainly as a recipient of military aid. Now, countries that fear Iranian drones are looking at Ukraine as a source of practical knowledge, not theory, not peacetime doctrine, but combat-tested experience. The same logic appears in software. The Ukrainian Sky Map platform has been reported in use at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, helping integrate sensor and radar data against drone threats. That matters because the drone problem is not only the flying object, it is the entire detection and response chain. Can the threat be seen? Can it be classified? Can the data be shared quickly? Can an interceptor be assigned? Can the system avoid wasting expensive missiles? Can operators act fast enough? Ukraine's experience is valuable because it has had to answer those questions every night. Russia launches drones. Ukraine detects them. Some are jammed. Some are shot down. Some get through. Then Ukraine studies what happened and adapts again. That is a brutal school. But it is also a school that Europe cannot ignore. Europe's drone wall problem is therefore deeper than procurement. It is not enough to announce a new project. It is not enough to buy more systems. And it is not enough to assume that existing armies can add drones as a small extra layer. Drones change the way units move. They change logistics. They change camouflage. They change training. They change command and control. They change the value of armor. They change the economics of air defense. And they change the speed at which militaries must adapt. This is where Europe faces a cultural challenge. European defense procurement is often slow. Programs take years. Requirements become complex. Budgets are negotiated. Industries protect national interests. Armies test, evaluate, and wait. But drone warfare moves faster than that, and design can become obsolete in months. A radio link can be jammed. A frequency can be compromised. A new countermeasure can appear. A cheap drone can force $1 million response. And a small unit with skilled operators can change the battlefield in ways that used to require much larger formations. That is what the Ukrainian exercise experience has shown. In one NATO exercise in Estonia, a small Ukrainian drone team reportedly exposed how vulnerable conventional formations can be when drones and software make the battlefield transparent. The point is not that NATO is useless. The point is more serious. Traditional formations can be punished very quickly if they operate as if drones are just a secondary threat. They are not. Drones are now central. This does not mean tanks are obsolete. It does not mean artillery is obsolete. It does not mean infantry is obsolete. But it does mean that everything must operate under constant observation. A tank must move differently. A command post must hide differently. A supply route must be planned differently. A battalion must think about drones the way it once thought about artillery and air power. Every movement can be seen. Every signal can be detected. Every exposed vehicle can become a target. And every army that ignores this will pay. That is the warning Ukraine is giving Europe, not through speeches, not through theory, but through the battlefield. Russia is also learning. That makes the problem even more urgent. Moscow is not standing still. Russia has expanded drone production. It has improved jamming. It has adapted tactics. It has used drones for reconnaissance, strikes, and saturation attacks. So Europe is not preparing against a static enemy. It is preparing against an enemy that is also learning from Ukraine. This is why the drone wall cannot be only a border project. It must be a learning system. It must connect Ukraine's experience with European industry. It must connect frontline lessons with NATO training. It must connect cheap production with serious command systems. And it must connect national defense plans with a new reality of mass unmanned warfare. The central question is not whether Europe can build drones. It can. The question is whether Europe can build the right ecosystem quickly enough. Can it produce cheap interceptors at scale? Can it train enough operators? Can it integrate sensors and software? Can it defend bases, power plants, ports, and logistics hubs? Can it avoid wasting expensive missiles on cheap targets? Can it update systems as fast as the enemy changes tactics? That is the real drone wall problem. Ukraine has exposed it because Ukraine has lived it. The war has turned Ukraine into a military laboratory, but also into a warning. Future wars may not begin with tank columns alone. They may begin with swarms of cheap drones, electronic warfare, sensor networks, and attacks on logistics and infrastructure. The country that adapts fastest may survive. The country that waits for perfect systems may lose time it cannot recover. For Europe, the lesson is uncomfortable. Ukraine still needs Western weapons. Ukraine still needs missiles, ammunition, air defense, and money. But Europe also needs Ukraine. It needs Ukraine's experience. It needs Ukraine's drone culture. It needs Ukraine's understanding of how modern kill zones work. And it needs to understand that the future of air defense may be cheaper, faster, more distributed, and more software-driven than Europe expected. That is why Ukraine is no longer just a customer. It is a teacher. It is a test range. It is a producer. And it is becoming a potential exporter of the most practical battlefield knowledge in the world. Europe wants a drone wall, but Ukraine has already shown what that wall really requires. Not just hardware, not just budgets, not just political declarations. It requires a new way of fighting, a new way of producing, and a new way of learning under pressure. That is the problem Ukraine has exposed, and Europe now has to solve it. If you found this analysis useful, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next report.